I believe that a wife should be submissive and sweet toward her husband, and the husband should be authoritative and self-sacrificial on behalf of his wife. He makes the decision. And if he makes a decision that goes contrary to her wishes, she should be submissive and obey. She should be a sweetheart about it. Yes.
Do you see how that sounds convenient? Because if it was reversed and my wife came to me and said, "Oh, I've got this great book and it says that you should be submissive to me and I should get to decide all these things," I'm not sure I'd rock with that. You get that that doesn't sound like America?
No, it sounds very much like America was.
Okay. So, all right, so you
at the
acknowledge
founding,
we'd be going backwards, but that's okay. You're conservative and you're Christian national, so you want to go backwards to some degree. Do you think that America is dystopian and we're in a disastrous shape because of the diversity that we have of all those different factions in one place?
Yeah, you must be enjoying a different news feed than I read. It should sting, but not damage.
So you're going to need people to use good judgment on sting, but not damage.
Yeah, correct.
You see how sometimes people might not have good judgment on that? That is Pastor Doug Wilson. He's the leader of Christ Church. It's a 1,000-member congregation, and he's going to join us now. Pastor Wilson, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Great to be with you.
All right. I am fascinated by your opinions. We're going to talk about them and find out what they are in detail.
Great.
So we just showed you some of the things that you said on CNN. We showed everybody there. So let's start with that a little bit. So you talk about homosexuality being a sin. So you think it should be banned in America? Do I understand that right?
Yeah, I think that we should, Obergefell should be overturned. Basically, we should reject Obergefell delenda est. It should be gone. So the point that I was making there in CNN was not primarily the status of the sodomy laws back in the 70s and earlier. But my point was that the presence of those laws did not turn America in the 60s and 70s into the Handmaid's Tale. In other words, it was not a dystopic moonscape back then when we had more restrictive sexual customs, mores, and laws that reflected that. So that was the principal point, is that people who are arguing that those of us who are sexual conservatives and who want a restoration of traditional norms in our marriage laws are not theo-fascist. That's the first point, not theo-fascist. Then after we agree on that, we can debate the policy proposal on the merits.
All right, so let's take it one by one. So Obergefell is about gay marriage, so not about sodomy laws. So are you?
Right.
So I'm curious about gay marriage too. But first, are you saying that we should bring back sodomy laws or no?
Yeah, I think that sodomy, homosexual acts should be against the law. Yes, right.
So now you know sodomy is both anal and oral sex.
Yes, I understood that. Yes.
Yeah, and you think that that should be banned for both gay men and straight men and women.
So no, because what we're dealing with is two definitions of sodomy. One would be the definition of sodomy in the laws that we had in American law back in the mid 20th century, which included oral, anal, same-sex, heterosexual, everything, which I think was broader than biblical law. A biblical definition of sodomy, I don't think would be that restrictive.
So I'm going to read between the lines there, but I'm going to ask you for clarification. So it sounds like you're saying oral sex is and anal is fine for straight folks like you, but not for gay folks.
No, I think anal sex is a perversion for heterosexual couples also. But then we're going to layer a number of issues. There's a difference between a sin and a crime. Okay. Mm-hmm. So there are some things that I would regard as a minister as sinful that ought not to be against the law. And then there are some things that ought to be against the law. So same-sex marriage, I call it, ought to be not a legal thing. I want homosexual unions to be not a thing anymore. So consequently, I want those relationships to be banned, not recognized, not honored, not glorified. And secondly, I think that it ought to be against the law. Having said that, when you look at the actual practice of how those things were governed when they were against the law in America, it wasn't like that sort of law was used to shut down bathhouses or gay bars or that sort of thing. It wasn't a matter of a sexual Gestapo going from door to door, house to house.
I actually went to law school, and it kind of was. In fact, the Bowers versus Hardwick is a Texas case, if I remember correctly, where they literally barged into a couple's home and arrested them for having the wrong kind of sex.
But the warrant there was for another offense. So what happened is when they had a warrant for another offense, came into the house and found them engaged in the sexual activity, and they threw that into the charges. So that's the.
But if you do barge into, if the government, big government, barges into your home for whatever reason, they find you in the wrong kind of sex, you think that person should be arrested?
I don't think there's anything perverse or evil about charging them with this additional crime if they had a warrant and they're not. So let's put it this way. If you have a situation like that, I want what I want is for the government to be under restraint as well as the people, right? So I'm entirely in favor of probable cause, getting a warrant, a judge to give a warrant, that sort of thing. If you have a collection of offenses and a sexual offense is one of them, and it's against the law, then I don't see any problem with charging them with that also, right?
Okay, so one last detailed question here, and then I want to ask you about the philosophy behind it.
Sure.
It's just, actually, I want to clarify because we talked about it before, but you're saying for gay couples, sodomy of any sort should be illegal, and then for straight couples, anal should be illegal, but oral is just a sin, but not illegal.
No, so for this one thing, this is going to come out at some point or other. I'm a Bible guy. And if you read the Song of Solomon and you read the Song of Solomon carefully, it's very clear that sexual example of biblical erotica, not pornography, but erotica, that book in the Bible very clearly has oral foreplay at least involved in it. And so I don't want the civil magistrate coming into the bedroom that way and saying you can't do things that the Bible says is okay.
So Pastor Wilson, you see it, right? You see that seems like others will look at it and go, well, that seems pretty convenient, that it's okay for you, but not for them.
Yeah, people will say that.
Yeah, people will say that. Okay, and then do you get that? And then people can debate this, and obviously people will debate you on it, et cetera. But I'm trying to find out. So you get that when you say straight people should be allowed to be married, but gay people shouldn't. Straight people can get some form of sodomy, but gay people shouldn't. That is by definition unequal. You see that, right?
That's absolutely. I could carp and criticize a little bit. A homosexual man has as much right to marry a woman as I do. So it's not, in one sense, it's not uneven at all. Nobody's passing a law saying someone with homosexual tendencies is banned from marrying a woman. I'm allowed to marry a woman, and so is he. All right. I don't think the law should say that anybody's sexual choice, whatever their predilection is, should be honored or recognized by the state as an acceptable manifestation of our sexual impulses, because we're now dealing with minor attracted persons, right? MAPS. When you look at the LGBTQ plus community, I want to know what's underneath that plus. Who are we talking about there? Does it include pedophiles? Does it include people who are attracted to minors?
No.
And if it, what are we talking about?
No, it doesn't include those things, and those things are illegal. It's because they don't involve consent. It's with people who can't give consent. They're under the age of 18.
Well, they're illegal now until they're not.
Okay, no, but good news. You and I agree that they should. That should definitely be illegal. We don't agree on the rest of it, and that's because I believe in equal rights, and that seems like a very, very core American, philosophy and ideology. One more thing about American ideology, I also believe in freedom, but it seems like this certainly takes freedom away. You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to do this. You're not even allowed to do it in the privacy of your own home. You're not allowed to love the person you like. Well, you could maybe love them, but you can't marry them. You can't have sex with them. I don't know if you can hold their hands or kiss. I don't know, right? But obviously that's against freedom.
Yeah, there's freedom is not absolute. Yeah, you're correct. Yes.
Okay. All right, good. Right. Look, I love that you're being honest. You're being clear about it, right? So to me, that's not America, but that's okay. You think that is America?
Yeah, but wait. Just I want to stop you there. Was it America in 1960? Was America America for most of our history?
Yeah, Pastor Wilson. The way I see it is that one of the things I love about America is that it keeps improving. It keeps saying, hey, you know what? Maybe we should expand a little bit. In fact, let's get into those areas, because what we did was we expanded what I call the circle of liberty. And part of the reason I'm a progressive is because I believe in expanding the circle of liberty. And for some conservatives like yourself, I think you're a pretty good example of it. You don't believe in that. You think that there should be different layers of rights for folks. So I want to give you a chance to clarify your comments about slavery, because I think if I heard you right, you're saying, hey, listen, I'm not saying that it was right, but some people were treated well. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm saying that the institution as a whole was a bad idea. We're fallen human beings. We're prone to be selfish and self-centered, and it's not a good idea to give people like that the kind of control over other human beings that a master has over a slave. So the slavery is gone from America, and my attitude toward that is good riddance. I'm glad it's gone. Okay. At the same time, I don't believe in the orcification of everyone who was a slave owner. Some of the slave owners in the South were awful human beings, and they would fit the description, the worst nightmare of the most ardent abolitionist. Though they fit that description, and those people ought to have been charged criminally. It ought to have been against the law, and in many cases was. Abusing a human being under any circumstances is no bueno. All right. If you read the slave narratives, back in FDR's administration, he commissioned a bunch of people to go interview former slaves, a number of whom were still alive. And I've read a bunch of those interviews. I've read the slave narratives, a big chunk of them. And some of the stories are heartbreaking in how awful they were. And some of them displayed warm, affectionate relationships between masters and slaves, and the former slaves longing for, expressing how much they loved their people. And that's an example of people being decent human beings in the midst of a bad system, a bad institution. So all I'm arguing for there is that we ought not to vilify or demonize an entire class of people.
Okay, so I understand the context of time and human relationships being complex. A quick question before we go to the heart of the matter. Was America in 1850? Because you were saying that in the 1960s, America was still America, even though we outlawed sodomy. But you're saying you're against slavery, but America did have slavery in 1850. So was America in 1850?
Yes. Yes.
It was, okay, but it's good that we improved by getting rid of slavery, right?
Correct. Yeah, your point about improvement is a good one. The fact that I believe that my country was recognizably my country in 1850 is not to say that there's no room for improvement.
Okay, good. Then we agree. 1850, 1960, room for improvement.
Yeah, room for improvement. And then the question would become, is this in fact an improvement?
Yeah. Okay, so now, on the issue of slavery. So is it possible that they were, within the context of history, they did not realize, they were blinded, as a lot of folks today are blinded by race and the fact that there were cultural assumptions and expectations there? I think that I understand that concept, right? But Pastor Wilson, at the same time, isn't owning people by definition bad or evil? I mean, even if you say, hey, look, I could whip the skin off your back, I could rape you, but I'm choosing not to. But even the fact that they could and they own them like property, isn't that evil by definition?
Yeah, it's a bad system and it ought to have been eradicated. Before the war between the states, most of the abolitionist societies were in the South. And there were a lot of people in the South who knew that this was not a good deal. They knew this was untenable. It was not righteous. It was not good. And I think it was right and proper for people to be working for the abolition of slavery. Yeah, so no argument there.
Yeah, I guess one more question I'd ask there, Pastor. So why bother going back and defending slave owners?
That's a great question. This goes back to what I said earlier where I said I'm a Bible guy. So if I'm in let's say being interviewed, let's say a situation like this, and I'm telling you, I believe that same-sex unions are sinful and we ought not to recognize them. And you say, how come? And I say, well, in Leviticus, it says that it's an abomination. In Romans 1, it says that this is the end road of degenerative practices. And I cite a bunch of Bible verses. And then you say, well, you're citing the Bible, but the Bible allows for slavery. There's slavery in the Old Testament. There's slavery, there's Hebrew slavery in the Old Testament. There's pagan Roman slavery in the pages of the New. The New Testament is filled with instructions to slave owners and slaves on how to comport themselves in this situation. So if I say, if you say, well, the Bible can't be trusted on sexual mores and customs because the Bible allows for slavery. And if I start saying, well, yeah, the Bible allowed for slavery, but that was then and this is now, I don't want to be the kind of Christian who says, well, I can play that was now, that was then, this is now game, but homosexuals don't get to play that game. If I start messing around with the Bible to make it say what I wish it would have said, then the homosexuals get to do the same thing.
Yeah, because they would both be going in the positive direction of equal rights and justice and freedom. I mean, at least it's positive from an American perspective. That's what we're taught. But then wait, Pastor Wilson, let me ask you. Then if you want to walk back gay rights because of the biblical thing, and you say, well, I got to defend it. So that's where do you want to walk back the slavery thing? I mean, because you say it's in the Bible, so is it okay or not okay?
No. Basically, the whole debate about slavery is not whether or not we should institute slavery. In the Roman world, when Christ rose from the dead and the gospel was going out throughout the Roman world, it was going into a world in which slavery was ubiquitous. Slavery was everywhere. It was as ordinary as having a mortgage on your house is today. It was just everywhere. Everybody just assumed it. Now, I believe that the biblical principles that were taught and articulated by the Apostle Paul particularly were a time bomb placed underneath slavery, a time bomb with a long fuse, particularly in the book of Philemon. In Philemon, Paul is returning a runaway slave named Onesimus, who is a Christian now, to his owner, Philemon, who is a friend of Paul's and also a Christian. And so this book is, if you examine it closely, it shows how Paul is urging Philemon to set his slave free, and the principles contained within it are a long-term way of subverting the paradigm of slavery. So I believe that the Bible is authoritative. So I believe that a Christian master who inherits his father's plantation in 1850, and he owns 20 slaves, and he goes to his Bible for instruction on how to live, I think if he reads his Bible carefully, he is not just going to be taught to treat his slaves right. He is going to be taught to treat his slaves right as a way of subverting the whole institution. Now, so I do believe that the Bible back then is authoritative, and we should implement it today. But that doesn't mean that we're asking for a redo at Gettysburg. What it means is if you inherit a slave-owning system, you should eradicate it the biblical way and not the bloody way that we did.
So, Pastor Wilson, I know that slavery has been around for centuries, and people have done it all across the world. It's not just an American problem,
Right.
but do you get two things? One is that it looks like we're coming at it from the discussion you just had is coming at it from the slave owner's perspective and whether he's okay or not okay, et cetera. But we're not really coming at it from the slave's perspective, which is, well,
the reason
I don't like being bought or sold or or any of this stuff.
Right. I get that. That's a good point. I get it. But the reason I'd come at it from the slave owner's position, the perspective, is that he's the one who's in a position to do something about it. The slave, by definition, isn't in a position to do something about it. The slave owner can. The slave owner can set his slaves free. The slave owner can determine to make sure that they're treated well. He can train them and equip them so that when they're free, they can make their own living. The slave owner is in a position of control, and so he's the one who needs the bulk of the instruction. I'd like to also point to something you just said that I agree with. Slavery has been ubiquitous throughout the history of the world, and the great Thomas Sowell has made the point that it is sort of this universal phenomenon, and slavery was eradicated in the Western world, in America, by a war. The British Empire outlawed slavery as a result of the work of a British evangelical parliamentarian, one of my heroes, a man named William Wilberforce. He's the one who got slavery outlawed in the British Empire, and then the British Empire used her fleet, her naval power, to suppress slavery all over the world. And what Thomas Sowell has said, slavery is ubiquitous everywhere, and the Western world, the English-speaking world, is the first quadrant of civilization that outlawed it, that got rid of it. And now, today, in our politically correct culture, they are the societies that are blamed as unique purveyors of slavery. And that, I think, is just upside down.
Yeah, so I don't think that most historians get that wrong. I think they get it right. They know that it was across the world, and they know that it was eradicated at different times. I don't know that America certainly was not the first. We were a holdout for a long, long time. But last thing on it is, do you get why, if you're an African American in this country, this talk of like, were some of the slave owners not so bad is deeply disconcerting?
No.
Okay, I mean, like you really don't see it. Like can you not see? I mean, just on an emotional level, like, wait a minute, this was in the day, they would sell your babies off. Right, and they could rape the women anytime they wanted, and if you even dared to disobey, they'd, you know all the stories, and so yeah. So when somebody's talking about but maybe some of the slave owners weren't so bad, like, can you not see how that would trouble people?
I can understand why it's happening, but as a pastor, I've done a lot of marriage counseling over the years, and I've seen marriages that are frankly a helicopter crash. It's just a bad situation, and I could write a book narrating all these marriage troubles and horrendous abuses and problems and sins and whatnot. And if I say to someone who grew up in a family like that, yeah, but some marriages are not like that, I can understand why they would jump or their left eye would start to twitch. Yeah, I understand that. But the fact remains that some marriages are not like that, right? So the issue is, I want to say that evil slave owners were evil. Evil slave owners were evil. We have no argument. And the slave owners that broke up families and that sold children off and that raped the women, those slave owners were sinning against God and man, and and God will judge it at the last day. So there's no argument for me about all the awful stuff. I'm simply saying it was not awful stuff across the board. There were some people.
Yeah, so last thing I'll say on it, from my perspective, is that, look, I get the complexity of George Washington and Thomas Jefferson doing both amazing things and horrific things at the same time, right? I get that complexity. At the same time, I think owning a human being is evil by definition. If evil exists, that's gotta be it. That's my sense of it.
Yeah, and so my retort, my rejoinder there would be everything's buried in that phrase, if evil exists. And that would take us into the subject of Christian nationalism, because if evil exists, well, if there is no God, if there is no transcendent authority over us all telling us how we're supposed to live, then I'm sorry, evil doesn't exist.
Yeah, so that's an interesting theological debate, and one or discussion, and on another day, maybe we should do that, because that's a fascinating topic. But in this country, of course, we're ruled by laws, and the laws are determined by all of us together. We're a democracy, and as you know, and let's transition to Christian nationalism. I'm glad you brought it up. Obviously, there's Jewish folks, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, atheists, etc. Right? And I'm in kind of in two of those categories. I was born Muslim, but I'm an atheist now. So what becomes of me in a Christian nation?
So the first thing that's important to qualify is that when I'm asked questions about this, as you're doing now and as CNN did and whatever, we have to make a distinction between how I would define an ideal biblical republic 500 years down the road. What's my ideal setup there? How would I create this biblical republic utopia? That's one thing. And the other issue is, what do I think we should do now with the current facts on the ground? We have, when America was founded, it was overwhelmingly Protestant, 98% Protestant, white Protestant colonies up and down the eastern seaboard. That was one situation, and that's not the situation we have now. And so politics is the art of the possible, and you want to take into account all the prudential circumstances and so forth. What I would want to do is, there's a difference between union and unity. So I'm not suggesting anybody do this, but if you were to tie two cats together by the tail and throw them over a clothesline, you would have union, but no unity. And what we have done with our reckless immigration policies is we have imported vast numbers of people way beyond our capacity for assimilation. And that means that we've just set up warring cohorts, warring groups that are suspicious of each other, that are jealous of each other, that it causes all kinds of difficulties. So the first thing I would do today is turn off the spigot. I'd stop making the problem worse until you have some sort of robust system that would allow you to have 10 million Muslims and 10 million Hindus and 10 million Christians and 10 million Jews all live in the same territory without being at each other's throats. It's not a good idea to do that. So what's happening is we are involved without any political theology or theory to guide us. We are busy turning the Ohio-Michigan border into the India-Pakistan border. You need to have some kind of process of assimilation. You've appealed a number of times to certain shared American values. Well, what kind of sense does it make to import millions of people who don't share those values at all?
So let's break it down one by one. First of all, what if you said what if there was a territory that had millions of Muslims and Hindus and Christians and Jews? How would they ever get along? Good news, such a territory does exist. It's called America. I mean, look, we're not perfect as a country, but we seem to be doing okay. We're still the #1 economic power in the world. We're #1 military power in the world, and we have tremendous diversity. And there's a good argument to be made that that diversity is actually what led us to being so powerful. So do you think that America is dystopian and we're in a disastrous shape because of the diversity that we have of all those different factions in one place?
Yeah, you must be enjoying a different news feed than I read. I see burgeoning, bubbling conflict rising everywhere. Right? So, just to be frank, Charlie Kirk was a friend of mine, and he just got shot down for talking to people on a college campus. Right? And we came within an ace of the same thing happening to the President Trump at Butler, Pennsylvania. And God be praised, the result of Charlie Kirk being killed resulted in a number of prayer vigils and church services and things that were peaceful, entirely peaceful. But you have to understand that I think we are in far more perilous a situation than I think we've ever been since 1858. I don't think the country has been as divided as we are now for over a century, and it is very clear to me that we are. It wouldn't take too many incidents, like 2 or 3 in a row, to have the shooting start.
Yeah, I hope to God that doesn't happen. And
me too. I agree.
Yeah, and I don't. Okay, so let's break it down one by one again. So Charlie Kirk got killed in a tragic way, horrific way, and I knew him as well, and we debated him. Sometimes we agreed, right? Yeah, and that's the beauty of America. And we had diversity of opinion, so that's also the beauty of America. So
that's great.
But on that same day, millions of Jews, Christians, Muslims, etc., in this country got along perfectly well. So both things are true. So there is one tragic shooting, but then millions of positive interactions. So now MLK was shot. Now you could say, well, okay, we're not getting along, so let's separate out white and black people. But Pastor Wilson, isn't that the opposite of the American idea, that we don't separate out everybody and we don't say, okay, unequal rights and unequal living quarters and unequal this and that? No, we bring people together with the melting pot, and that's our strength.
Part of what I want to agree with you here, let's say some awful thing happens. I want everybody involved, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Christian, to be treated with justice. I don't think a tragedy allows us to start ripping people off or retroactively revoking rights and stuff. I think we ought to do right by everybody. But I would say when Martin Luther King was shot in 1968, I was 15 at the time. And then when Charlie Kirk was shot, there was basically someone on the left was shot with MLK. Someone on the right was shot when Charlie Kirk was. And in both cases, it was largely peaceful in the aftermath. When George Floyd was killed, cities burned. Okay, we're not in as stable a position as many people would like to think. So this is, I think we need to sort through some of the fundamental questions. Who are we? Who is God? What are we? What are we supposed to be doing here? And I don't think freedom is an adequate virtue that supports itself. You can't take something like freedom or liberty and then suspend it from an invisible skyhook and just have everybody say freedom is a good thing. Now, I value freedom and I want to argue for freedom, but I believe it depends on a transcendental value, a transcendental anchor.
Yeah, so I have a unique opinion on George Floyd and January 6th. So Martin Luther King said that riots are the voice of the unheard. And so I think that a lot of African Americans in this country suffered a lot of abuse from police and the people in power, or as the right would say, the jackbooted thugs of big government, right? And then I think that a lot of right-wingers in this country felt like nobody was standing up for them, and that the media ignored them and belittled them. And I think a great frustration built up, and then they had January 6th. So I saw both sides do it, and I understand the reasons why both sides do it, even though we don't want either side to do it. Okay.
Yeah.
So
minus the 275 FBI guys.
Okay, I hear you. That's another debate for another day. But you see how both sides discontent grows and then it explodes, and I don't want
That's correct.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
And I want to agree with you. There are people on the right who are fully susceptible to giving way to frustration that explodes in an unhelpful way. That does exist. Yes.
Okay, great. So, but when you say like we let too many people in, we should stop. And again, immigration is an interesting and complex issue today. And but you said also in the past. So, it's a little awkward because here we are, two human beings talking to one another, and we've been very respectful of one another. But I got to ask. So, should I have not come?
Oh, I have no idea. I'm sorry of your personal history. I don't know when you came or how you came, but I have no problem with legal immigration.
Yeah, I came. My family came when I was 8 years old. We moved to New Jersey. We love this country. We came for freedom, and we came for justice, and we came for equal rights.
It's a little late, but I would say welcome.
Okay, all right. So you're not opposed to immigrants from different religions and backgrounds coming in legally?
Right, and legally and in an assimilatable way. So my problem is the illustration I use is, let's say you have a family, a nice Christian family. They've got a couple of kids, and they take in 2 foster kids, and everything's stable, and it's a little crazy for a while, but they're taking good care of all 4. That's a good thing. I like the fact that there are families that take in foster kids. But then let's say a bus from the county pulls up one day and there's 28 new foster kids, and they drop off 28 new ones. And the father could go out there and be arguing with the bus driver, and he could say, look, I was taking good care of my 2 kids, and I think we were taking a pretty good job loving on our 2 foster kids. But if you drop these 28 off, we're not going to be loving anybody. We're not going to be helping anybody.
Yeah.
And the problem is that they don't have the resources to assimilate them, or take care of them, or feed them, or house them.
So, Pastor Wilson, I hear you on that, but that's an immigration question, right? So in this case, we're talking about Christian nationalism, and so. How about Christians coming in? Europeans, maybe they're bothered by what's happening in too much Muslim immigration in Europe, and they want to come to America. Can we allow Christians to come?
Yeah. I believe in controlled legal immigration, and I believe that there's some Christian places where you would have as much difficulty with cultural assimilation if you did it in mass numbers. I want to have a modest, controlled, legal, sane approach to immigration, and I believe that Christians are going to be able to assimilate more readily, and so consequently, I believe that even with our out of control southern border, I believe that we are in a better place in terms of assimilation than Europe is. With Europe, the Muslim immigrants are largely Muslim, and in America on the southern border, the immigrants who came across the border were either Catholic or Pentecostal, but Christian, Trinitarian of some sort, which means that there isn't as wide a cultural divide. There isn't as wide, it's not as alien a world, which means that assimilation is going to be more possible, but it's not going to be possible if you're dealing with 12 million people just dropped on your doorstep, no matter who they are.
Again, so that's an immigration issue, but in terms of the religion issue, look, I don't want to get sidetracked because real quick, I'll say my point of view on that.
Yeah, sure.
I think the Italians came in, and this is such a hilariously oversimplistic way of looking at it, but just just so people can get a sense of where I stand on it. Italians came in, they gave us pizza and pasta. The Irish came in, we got St. Patrick's Day. The Jews came in, we got beautiful diners. I mean, I'm obsessed with diners and delis and bagels and lox. And Hindus came in and we got great Indian food, etc. I think that made us stronger. I think that made us better. So
I like all those things.
Okay, all right. So now let's back to religion. So since I am not a Christian, in a Christian, if you got your way and we have Christian nationalism, do I have the same rights as you?
There would be, yes, you'd have the same rights, but you wouldn't have the same privileges. So, for example, I mentioned earlier the ideal republic 500 years down the road. In a biblical republic that was explicitly Christian, there would be religious tests for office holders, right? So, if you came to America in 1800 and you were living in South Carolina, you wouldn't, as a Muslim, or as an atheist, actually, you wouldn't be allowed to hold public office. You couldn't be elected to the legislature, but you'd be allowed to live there.
Yeah. So you get that doesn't sound like America?
No, it sounds very much like America was.
Okay. So, all right. So you acknowledge we'd be going backwards, but that's okay. You're conservative and you're Christian national, so you want to go backwards to some degree. Do you get that doesn't make me feel that great? Okay, well, I mean, we're going to let you exist, but I mean, obviously you can't be in a position of power because you're not Christian.
You would have equal rights in that you would have the right to fair trial, the right of habeas corpus, the right to free speech, the right to keep and bear arms. But basically, if you have a Christian society, if the Constitution acknowledged the truth of Christianity, if the Constitution acknowledged that Jesus rose from the dead, then of course that you're going to want to protect that. But I believe, honestly, that people who were religious minorities, Jews, Muslims, who are here in the smaller numbers that would make this possible would be treated, certainly should be treated with equity and fairness, yes.
But not equality. Because they wouldn't get to run for office. They wouldn't get to participate in democracy in that way. They could be ruled, but they could not be part of the ruling class. Only Christians.
Correct. So if I moved to Saudi Arabia, I wouldn't expect to be allowed to do anything in terms of governance.
Yeah, see, that's a great point, because that's why I didn't move to Saudi Arabia, even though our family was Muslim. We moved to America, right? Because so you don't want to turn us. But now I'm beginning to wonder: do you want to turn us into a Christian Saudi Arabia?
No, not at all.
It seemed like you were arguing for that, though, because you were saying, yeah, you wouldn't be equal in Saudi Arabia because it's a Muslim state, and I hate that. I want you to be equal everywhere, right? But you're saying, we would make America into a place where, like in Saudi Arabia, non-Christians would not be equal.
This goes back to a point made by Aristotle, which is that there's a difference between behavior that democracies like and behavior that preserves democracies. All right? There are certain worldviews that are antithetical to the very idea of freedom. They don't believe in it. They don't believe in it for anybody. Now, I believe it is suicidal for a society to import large numbers of people who don't share those values. Now, and this is, so if someone says, hey, if you believe in freedom and equality, then why don't we just import 10,000 jihadis? Right? Well, I don't want them here. It's that simple, because I might be obeying
people. Like when you say jihadis, of course, nobody wants terrorists. Nobody wants people who commit violence or espouse violence.
But that's their worldview. That's their religion.
No,
and I'm discriminating against it.
So, brother, so there's anywhere between 1.6 to 2 billion Muslims, for example, to pick another religion. And you said jihadis. Jihadis are the most extreme, radical end of that religion. right? As there is a radical end to Christianity, there is a radical end to Judaism and Hinduism, etc. So that
agreed.
But the rest of the 1.6 billion are aunts and grandmas and kids, and they do things that are enormously similar to you. Do you pray a lot? They pray 5 times a day. By the way, you believe Jesus is the Son of God and the holiest prophet. Good news, so do Muslims. They don't think that he's the Son of God, but they think that he is one of the most holy prophets in Islam. They think it's the 3rd book. Obviously, you don't agree with that. That's okay, that's normal. Muslims and Christians believe in different things. They believe that Jesus Christ is going to come back, not Muhammad, that Jesus Christ is going to come back and save us. So it doesn't sound, for the overwhelming majority of Muslims, it doesn't sound that different than you, does it?
Right. So let's put it this way. What I was talking about, what I was illustrating with the jihadis, was not whether they are the majority of Muslims. My point was simply that there are religions, there are worldviews that are antithetical to the American way of life. Okay, another one would be a secular one, would be communism, Marxism. Marxism is antithetical to the American commitment to liberty. So that's an ideology, not a ethnic or cultural thing, but it's a block that you can recognize. Now, in the name of democracy, you could import 10 million Marxists or 10,000 jihadis. I'm simply saying that to apply sort of let's treat everybody equally across the board, regardless of what they think, is an untenable position.
Yeah, so I think that, so when you say assimilate to freedom and American values, I think I kind of nailed it. And ironically, I think that's the debate and discussion we're having here, Pastor Wilson, because I say freedom for everyone and equality for everyone, including gay people, including black people, including Muslims, Christians, etc. Right, and certainly Jews and Hindus. And I'm a capitalist, but I'm not freaked out by Marxists. So like, in America, we have freedom. He can make that argument, I'll make the counter argument, and I'll win. I'm not bothered by any of that. But okay, but I want to ask you.
I'm convinced. Excuse me. I'm convinced that you would win the argument with the Marxist. I'm not convinced that you'd be able to argue at all if they took over.
No, but then they do violence. If you do violence, you're out, right? That's against the law. No,
if you do violence, you're out. If the people being oppressed fight back.
Yeah,
right, the communists took over.
But Pastor Wilson, you don't think the Marxists are on the verge of taking over America, do you?
Yes, I do.
You do?
Yeah.
All right.
There's a commie who's going to likely be the next mayor of New York.
Okay, so that's about Mamdani, and he's a democratic socialist. And that's definitely not a communist. But let's get back to, okay, the last thing on Christian nationalism. So if you have Christian nationalism, I'm curious, which denomination rules us all? Lutherans, Presbyterians, evangelicals, Pentecostals, who wins?
That's a wonderful question. Thank you. One of the books I wrote on Christian nationalism is called Mere Christendom. And just a little bit of inside baseball here. I'm a Presbyterian, not a Lesbiterian, I'm a Presbyterian. And in 1646, the Westminster Confession of Faith, which is the doctrinal standard of Presbyterians, was formulated in the UK. In 1789, the American Presbyterians adopted a modified version of the Westminster Confession. In England, the battle was over which denomination would control the Church of England. So in Denmark, they had the Church of Denmark. In England, they had Church of England. And there was a battle between, would the Puritans control the Church of England? Would the Presbyterians control it? Would what we now call the Anglicans control it? It was a battle for a centralized ecclesiastical establishment. In the American Westminster Confession, which I support at this point, they said basically it's the magistrate's job to support all the churches of our common Lord. So the First Amendment rightly rejects an established church. There should be no Church of the United States. Congress shall make no law concerning the establishment of religion. At the same time, I believe the state can and should be friendly to all the Christian denominations, the churches of our common Lord. So I don't believe that the Lutherans or the Presbyterians or the Baptists should be in control. But I do believe that there should be a Christian framework, or what the late Francis Schaeffer called a Christian consensus that surrounds the whole thing.
Okay, I mean, I'm a little confused because you say the First Amendment says there shall be no established religion, but you're saying there should be. The First Amendment is wrong. It should be Christianity.
I'm saying the First Amendment is right. The First Amendment says
so then why not have Islam and Judaism? And I mean, wouldn't that defeat Christian nationalism if you couldn't establish a religion?
There's a difference between an established church. The First Amendment says there will be no established church at the federal level. At the time the Constitution was ratified by 9 of the 13 colonies, the majority of the colonies had established state churches at the state level. Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Hampshire all had established the Congregational Church as the official church of their state. And then Vermont, when Vermont came into the Union as the 14th state, they came into the Union with an established state church at the state level. Now, I'm enough of a free state guy to I don't want established state churches at the state level either. But I do know that they're not unconstitutional. Right, so what the First Amendment prohibited was an established state church at the federal level. At the same time, there was a Christian consensus, which is much more of an informal thing. I'm arguing for a mere Christendom where there's shared Christian values, but there's no policing power that will make Smith or Murphy go to church at this church, or where the minister is paid from the taxes that he pays.
Yeah. So of course the Supreme Court has ruled that not establishing a religion means all religions, and so things have changed since the 1700s, et cetera. But last thing on this, and I want to move to our last topic. So I just want clarity on it. So you think it's okay to establish this as a Christian nation, and hence the religion of Christianity rules? But within Christianity, you could be okay within different, you're free to practice whatever you like, right?
Yeah, correct.
But if you're outside of Christianity, well then, I mean, I don't know if you're in trouble or you don't belong.
No,
you don't have any
you'd
power.
be free. You still have liberty of conscience. The people who are not Christians would still have the freedom to congregate and worship and pray. I'm not in favor of religious persecution at all.
But being unequal feels like persecution, doesn't it?
Well, it feels that way to we live in egalitarian times. And so it does feel that way to many people, but I believe that you have to land at some point. You have to come down and decide. Every human society has to decide what they believe on the big issues. And so I believe that Muslims and Hindus and Jews should be treated right. I believe that. I don't think any of them should be persecuted or harassed or forced to deny things that they believe or affirm things that they don't believe. All of that we would agree. But I also believe that a society, in order to be a coherent society, has to have fundamental shared values. And for example, the whole abortion debate that has torn our country apart is a great example of secularism generates value, an ethical system that is utterly contrary to the ethical system that would be generated by the Christian faith. We think that you don't get to kill the babies, and they think that it's a clump of cells, and it's not, that's not a problem.
Right.
That's a fundamental divide, and so I don't see how it's possible to take those two things and say, okay, put them together and let's just get along.
So Pastor Wilson, you're doing a great job of helping me with my transitions because I wanted to get to women's rights. So
okay,
now let's talk about the issue of abortion as that transition. So you brought that out. Well, the Christian view should win on that one, but 70% of the country right now is pro-choice. So what do we do with the 70% who don't agree with you?
What we do is we try to persuade them. We argue our case.
No, but in a Christian nation, I don't mean right now.
Oh, so in a Christian nation, we would outlaw abortion. all in a Christian nation. My joke is, what would I do if I were president? And the joke is, well, what a glorious 3 days that would be, right? If I were president, what kind of measure would I pass? I would outlaw all human abortion. Period.
So, but then that doesn't quite feel like a democracy, because we got 70% that you just said, well, my religion and my point of view beats yours. You're not as equal as I.
Right. The objection, if I could put it in different words, the objection to what I just said is, look, you're just coming in here and you want to impose your morality on people who don't share it. Right? Yeah. That's, and I would say, yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. I want to impose my morality. I believe that God said to Moses on Mount Sinai, you don't get to do this. You don't get to kill people. And because I believe that God really did speak to Moses, I believe that we really don't get to kill people. And so I'm going to impose that morality on the doctor and on the mother, right? I'm going to impose that morality. But the imposition of morality is an inescapable concept. It's not whether, but which. It's not whether we impose morality, because all law systems are imposed morality. And every law, every society imposes morality. And at the end of the day, someone is going to have somebody else's morality imposed on them. I want to impose Christian morality on the doctor and the mother and say to them, you can't do that.
Do you
they, at the end of the day, wait, if they get their way, the doctor and the mother will impose their morality on the child.
Right, what you believe as a child and they believe is a zygote or a fetus, etc. So,
yeah, correct.
No, but in that situation, Pastor Wilson, do you get that the woman there thinks that you are being deeply immoral because you are taking her freedom away, you're changing her life based on what you believe and not what she believes? I agree that the laws are about morality, but this country, again, 7 out of 10 people being pro-choice has said, we think it's more immoral if you take that freedom, the rights away from women to just, at a fundamental level, just to be able to control their own body. And so, yeah, we did have a clash of morality, and our side thinks that you're more immoral. So, but in a Christian nation, you would just overrule them and go, sad day for you, you don't get to believe in your own morality.
That's correct, but this would go back to something I've mentioned a couple times already, which is the transcendental arche, and the transcendental integration point of all these things. If there is no transcendental system of morality that overarches all of us, then our the clash between me and a pro-choice woman is no different than two dogs fighting over a piece of meat. We can fight, we can come into conflict, but we can't argue. In order to argue morality, there has to be a system that encompasses everyone. Because otherwise you're sitting down to someone and you think you're playing checkers and they think they're playing backgammon. If you sit down at the table playing two different games, it's going to end badly. It's going to end ugly. So there has to be a shared system of morality in order for us to argue at all.
Yeah, Pastor Wilson, I would argue that our system here in America of shared morality is democracy, where we all get together and no matter who we are, we vote together and we come to a decision. Your system of morality is, no, somebody decided this a long time ago, I believe it, so you must believe it. Or if you don't believe it, you're not going to quite have the same equality and morality that you were looking for.
But what do you...
Right,
yeah,
so that's the difference. That's okay.
So no, it's not a difference, because what do you do with the people who are not small d Democrats? You believe in democracy. Yeah. Well, there are people who don't believe in democracy. What do you do with them? They don't share that value. So why are you getting to impose democracy on them?
Because that's the country we live in. So if they want to live in a dictatorial country, good news, there's a lot of them, right? If they want to live in a religious state, by the way, there's a number of them. There's Saudi Arabia, Israel is in some sense a religious state, Iran. They're not shining examples of success. Okay, you've got the Vatican. The Vatican's lovely, but not very powerful.
Well, we come full circle because now you're in favor of deporting dissenters.
Oh, no, I'm just saying that our system is democracy. I mean, I don't know what happens if in a democracy people vote to take away democracy. That would be trippy. Yeah. It's never happened before, but
no, it has. Oh no, it has. President Erdogan in Turkey said that democracy is like a streetcar. He said you ride it until you get to where you're going, and then you get off.
Yeah, that's because he couldn't win elections. So that was not the Turkish people saying that. That was not democracy at large saying that. That was the guy in charge saying that, which is awfully convenient for him.
but he's still there.
Yeah, I mean, because they couldn't do a revolution yet, but
right.
I mean, but is that what you want for America though? For somebody to no, okay. So then I'm saying democracy, 7 out of 10 say we go in this direction, but you're saying no, I don't want that democracy. I want you the 3 out of 10 for us to go in that direction.
Right, but I understand that again, politics is the art of the possible, and so let's say that your breakdown is right, and it's 70% to 30%. I would look at that and say, well, we clearly have work to do. We should plant churches and preach sermons and write books and try to persuade people in a peaceable, loving way. We should do what Charlie Kirk did: go to the campuses and say, "Talk to me. Let's have this out. Let's exchange ideas."
Right.
That's what I would want to do, so that we could get that 30% higher.
Right. So I want to move on to women, but yeah, that's in today's world. But in the Christian nation, you wouldn't be able to do that. But that's okay. We've discussed that. So, I'm not asking if women should be equal, because men and women are biologically different, and so equal is too vague a word. So let me ask more specifically: should women have equal rights to men?
Yes, if you're talking about. Women should have the right to a fair trial, the right to keep and bear arms, the right to free speech, the right habeas corpus. All women should have all the same rights at that level that men do. Yes.
Okay. Do they have a right to say no to their husband sexually?
Yes. If the question is, do I believe that marital rape is okay? No, it's not okay. Not at all.
Oh, okay. All right, good.
There are people out there lying about me on that point, but that's that. So I'm glad. Thanks for the opportunity to say no. Marital rape is bad.
Okay, now I read, and so we have you on here, so that's why we get to ask you and have this conversation. That you were okay with spousal spanking, abuse. There's different words that you could put to it.
No.
Yes or no?
Absolutely not.
So no,
absolutely not.
Like not allowed to hit your wife at all.
Not allowed to hit your wife. So as a pastor, if I had a parishioner who slugged his wife, hit his wife, or tried to spank his wife, or was applying corporal punishment to his wife, call the cops, call the pastor.
Okay. I read about this. I never heard of this before. Blanket theory. Where there's apparently a phenomenon. I don't think you guys preach it, but I'm curious whether you agree with it or not. Because there's some question as to whether you guys do. Right. And again, that's why we have you on here.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so that if a baby walks away from a blanket, you spank it and corporal punishment to train the baby. Are you in favor of that or no?
No.
No.
So I do believe that toddlers, little kids, need to be disciplined and corrected and so forth. But I've never heard of this blanket theory that you're talking about. But let's say I do believe that if a toddler is told to take his nap and he gets up, I don't have any objection to godly, loving corporal punishment for sensible infractions that are sensibly applied, household rules. But sort of, I also believe that dictatorial parents who can mistreat their kids that way and are just awful that way. That'd be terrible.
Okay, so I've always wondered about that because I'm not in favor of corporal punishment. But where's the line for you? So, you can hit your kid. How much can you hit your kid?
What I teach people is that it should sting but not damage.
So you're going to need people to use good judgment on sting but not damage.
Yeah, correct.
You see how sometimes people might not have good judgment on that.
Oh, I know. Yeah, it's And when that happens, when parents abuse their children or overdo it with corporal punishment and they beat up their kids, there are few things in the world that are sadder than that. And Jesus said that if you stumble one of these little ones, it'd be better for a millstone to be tied around your neck and you thrown in the depths of the sea. It's awful to abuse a kid.
Okay, so should a woman listen to her husband inside a marriage?
Inside of marriage?
Yeah.
What do you mean? Listen to her husband?
Yeah, they obey his commands, directives.
Yeah, when I conduct a marriage ceremony, the vows are traditional vows, and the bride promises to love, honor, and obey. And the husband does not vow to obey his wife. The wife vows to obey her husband. That said, and I believe I'm a Christian Bible guy. The Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians 11 and in Ephesians 5 teaches that the husband is the head of the wife as Christ is the head of the church. So I believe that a wife should be submissive and sweet toward her husband, and the husband should be authoritative and self-sacrificial on behalf of his wife. And so when it comes down to some decision where the husband and wife, let's say a job offer, or are we going to move to a different state or something like that. Let's say a husband and wife can't come to an agreement. They go back and forth. And the decision has to be made, the deadline is tomorrow. Then I think the husband is the one who makes the decision, taking his wife's input fully into account. And sometimes he would decide the way he thinks that they should go, and sometimes he would defer to his wife, but he makes the decision. And if he makes a decision that goes contrary to her wishes, she should be submissive and obey. She should be a sweetheart about it. Yes.
Do you see how that sounds convenient? Because if it was reversed and my wife came to me and said, "Oh, I've got this great book and it says that you should be submissive to me and I should get to decide all these things," I'm not sure I'd rock with that.
Sure, but you don't want someone suddenly springing this on you 15 years in marriage. But in our community, what we're talking about are dedicated Christians who have been taught the Bible, who have grown up learning the Bible, reading the Bible. And so when a bride and groom come to the ceremony, they are both equally committed to this way of doing things.
What if it turns out a little bit differently? Because I know back in the day, my parents told me stories about in Turkey, they used to have arranged marriages, and then in the beginning, everybody agrees, and and the man is firmly in charge usually, especially back in the day, right? But then it turns out that the guy's not such a good guy, right?
Right.
And so is she just supposed to go, well, sad day for me? And that could be in a non-arranged marriage too. A lot of people fall in love and they want to, and then it turns out it's not quite what they expected. So what is she supposed to do there?
If it becomes abusive, if it's simply an unhappy marriage, then you provide counseling and as much help as you can. But if it turns toxic, where he's beating her up or threatening her life or threatening the kids or that sort of thing, I've been in more than one situation where we've helped a wife get out.
Okay, but if he's not hitting her, sad day. He's going to move you to Alaska. He wants you to work, not work. You want to be an artist. He wants you to be something else. You just got to listen to the husband. Suck it up.
Well, let's put it this way. This is a fallen world. And when two sinners marry each other, each one has the full capacity to make the other one miserable.
Yeah, I suppose they do. But then, in my secular world, I'd say, well, it doesn't seem like it's working out. We could go on our separate ways, and we wish it hadn't been. But it's we're not aligned, so we're going to get a divorce.
Right.
In a Christian nation, would a divorce be allowed in that circumstance, or no?
Yes. Jesus teaches that divorce is lawful when there's been adultery, when there's been infidelity. And the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians teaches that divorce is permissible on grounds of desertion. So desertion and infidelity would be the two main criteria that would justify a biblical divorce.
But if a wife is just miserable because the husband's just making terrible decisions she can't stand, that's not one of those two things. She's going to have to suck it up.
Yeah, yeah, and vice versa.
Can you see, Pastor Wilson, why women might not want to live in that society?
Yeah, but vice versa. I can also see why a man might not want to live with a wife who's being terrible. Yeah. So what you do is you teach people, you counsel them, you try. I'm a pastor. This is a big chunk of what I try to do is I try to help people who are unable to get along. I want to teach them how they can get along, how they can learn to confess their sins and humble themselves and work through this. And sometimes it doesn't work, it doesn't take, and the whole thing crashes. And it's a tragedy when it does. And there are situations where our pastoral team has decided that this is no longer tenable, and we give one of the spouses permission to move out of range.
So, you mentioned a couple of times, the wedding ceremonies, and you give counsel to folks in your church. So, there's the case of Steven Sittler that's gotten a little bit of controversy for you guys. So he's apparently a serial pedophile. He was convicted in 2005 of acts with a minor under the age of 16 in Idaho, and he was married to Katie Travis. And you officiated that wedding, and you actually discovered, if I got this right, some of his crimes. But then it seems like you got past it and thought that they should get married. Is that right?
Well, all the points you landed on are correct, right? So Steven Sittler began his career, began his pattern of abuse when he was 13. Years old. 5 years later, he came to New St. Andrews College, our college here, as a freshman. He was staying with a family that he had known back in his hometown, and abused a kid there, or attempted to, and was caught, was discovered. The father came to me and for advice, and I said, well, we need to turn him in. We need to report him, which was done immediately. Then Stephen came back when he was having to come back from his hometown to the town here, to Moscow, in order to deal with the legal issues. His parents arranged for me to provide pastoral counseling. As a result of that counseling, I uncovered other cases of abuse and required Stephen, and he cooperated, to bust himself on these other cases. So he did that, reported everything. So I was responsible for the reporting of most of those cases. He was convicted and served time. About 5 years after he was out, he met a young lady, was introduced to her by someone else. They got engaged and asked me to do the ceremony, which I was happy to do. And I would do it again. So he got a life sentence, and if he reoffended, he would be in prison for life. So that was a tragic situation that affected a lot of people negatively. It was a bad thing. But quite frankly, there are a lot of people who from across the country, a decade later, decided that they know what happened in all of that, and they just simply don't.
So I see in my notes that he later faced legal trouble again in 2015 for being sexually stimulated by his own child, and is now barred from seeing his son. So does that give you pause and make you think, well, maybe he wasn't what I thought he was, and maybe this wasn't the right way?
Sure, that's a possibility, but that's not the case. He's not barred from seeing his son, and he's not in jail. So
no, he's not in jail.
He's not in jail. He has a life sentence, and if he reoffended at any level, he'd be back in jail for life.
So I read it in my notes. Sorry, just correction for the audience and for you. He's not barred from seeing his son. He's barred from seeing his son alone. He can't be alone in the room with him.
There was a period of time where that was the case when they were sorting everything out.
Yeah. So that still didn't give you pause?
Yeah. So look, I'm a pastor again, and everything gives me pause. It's not like I think that it's no conceivable way that something bad couldn't happen. But in this situation, it hasn't.
Okay, so when you requested leniency for him earlier, when you married him off and et cetera, you think those are all the right decisions and he's on the right path?
Well, when people say that I requested leniency, what I said in the letter to the judge was that I was glad that Stephen was caught, and I said I was glad that he was facing hard consequences in real time, but I wanted the judge to respond in a measured way. So I didn't say anything about length of the sentence, or didn't use the word leniency. I did say that I thought it was good that he was caught, and I wanted him to face hard consequences in real time, but I didn't want the judge to lose his temper. So people have read a lot into that as well.
Okay, and then one more thing about some of the controversies around the church. So
sure,
Margaret Bronson and Susie Forshee say that they successfully escaped your church, which is an interesting way of putting it. And they lost a majority of their family to what they claim is a cult. And so what happens with cults, of course, is that there's a lot of different factors, but one of them is that if you leave, then you're shunned by family. So did that happen? And do you see why people might think, well, that sounds like a cult?
Yeah, so I could help you on the Stephen Sittler case, and there are other cases I could help you, but I'm frankly sorry, I have no idea who those women are.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so then let me ask you as a follow-up then, just in general. So if people leave your church, do they get shunned by their family or no?
No.
So no shunning, and perfectly free to come and go, no problem. You just don't happen to believe in the church anymore, but
yeah, if someone says, "Hey, I'm not feeling it anymore. We'd like to start attending the Baptist church or the Nazarene church," I shake their hand. We transfer them willingly and happily. We're happy to stay in fellowship with them. Nobody is shunned for leaving the church. That's never happened, not one time. Now, there are people in our church who have been disciplined for leaving their wives. Right? We are a church that practices church discipline, but we don't practice church discipline because someone doesn't like my preaching anymore. We practice church discipline if someone's caught embezzling at the bank and won't repent, or if someone left their wife and won't come back, or if someone is abusing their children and defends it. We would discipline for that sort of thing, and we would excommunicate them. And unapologetically excommunicate them. But we have never, ever disciplined anyone or shunned anyone because they decided to go to another church.
Okay, so I'm not a religious person, let alone in this type of organization. So help me understand, what does it mean to be disciplined in that context like that?
It means they are no longer given access to the Lord's Supper. So at the conclusion of every worship service, we have the Eucharist, or the Lord's Supper. We serve the bread of the bread, which represents the body of Christ, and the wine, which represents the blood of Christ, and everyone communes and partakes of the bread and wine. If someone is excommunicated, that means they are barred from the table. They are still welcome to come to the church. They're welcome to sing. They're welcome to sit and listen to the sermon. But the one thing they don't get is the Lord's Supper.
Okay, so that's a way of saying you've done something wrong here, and the rest of us are outing you in this very important part of our culture.
Correct.
And then who gets to decide if they've done something wrong enough?
The board of elders. So we have elders that are elected by the congregation, and sometimes the person is excommunicated and the facts of the case are not disputed. Let's say a man ditches his family and runs away with his secretary, and he doesn't contest it. We would simply proceed to excommunication. But if the facts of the case were contested, if someone said, "This guy ripped me off in a business deal," and the man said, "No, I didn't," then we would hold a trial. We would hear both sides, and they would have time to prepare their case, and the elders would listen to the evidence presented and then would decide whether he had done that or not. So if it's contested, there'd be a trial. If it's uncontested, there would simply be discipline by a vote of the elders.
I'm genuinely fascinated by this, and I don't know any of it. So, is a woman, a wife, disobeying her husband potentially an issue you could get sanctioned for?
It would depend on what she was disobeying him over, but if he wanted her to serve him taco salad tonight and she didn't do it, then no, you would never. That would never rise to an excommunicable offense. No,
but some things could. Like again, I don't know it at all. So like, what would be an offense that's near the line but is over it, and it would.
Let's say radical neglect of the children. Let's say.
Okay, then you get excommunicated. Yeah. Or maybe radical disagreement with the husband, like disobeying of the husband.
Well, it would depend again over what. If he was saying, "I'd like you to feed the children. I'd like you to not take them to the wild parties where they have to, navigate the drug addicts on the floor." If that's what he told her and she's ignoring him, then yeah, she could be disciplined, but it would be high level 10 Commandments stuff. So when we discipline someone, it's not over taking the pastor's wife's parking spot. It's not over trivial stuff. It's over 10 Commandments issues, murder, theft, adultery, etc.
Okay, I understand. All right, last thing along these lines, and then we'll wrap up. In your book, you wrote that, quote, a man penetrates, conquers, colonizes, plants, while, quote, a woman receives, surrenders, accepts.
Yeah.
So again, can you see how women would look at that and go, are you nuts? Why would I agree to
that? Well, I would say the thing that I would say in response is, look at us. After 50 years of sex education, don't people know what goes on? Are the people who get upset about this, do they believe that the man doesn't penetrate?
Yeah, I understand that that's a physical act. The conquering and the colonizing, a little less so.
Yeah. So the colonizing has to do with he plants his seed and a new life comes to a new and distinct life, gestates within her, and then she gives birth to a child, and you all of a sudden you've got a new human being there. And on the conquest part, anybody who has any understanding of the history of erotic poetry, John Donne's poetry, for example, or in the Song of Solomon that I referenced earlier, where the woman's beauty is described as she is someone who is as terrible as an army with banners. That's the language of conquest. So when both parties are in love, when both parties are attracted to each other, that's part of the attraction. Now, if someone wanted to say, well, what those verbs could also be used to describe a rape, I would agree. Yeah, a man could conquer, by means of rape. He could penetrate in a rape and all of that. But I wasn't talking about that, right? That wasn't talking about that. So that quote is taken from an article that I wrote. I believe it was for the Huffington Post. I'd have to go back and check, but I was responding to the whole 50 Shades of Grey stuff, and I was talking about rape fantasies, and I was arguing that rape fantasies came from a denial of a normal, healthy interaction between the sexes. So what people have done is they've taken that description that was in the context of a healthy interaction between the sexes, and they tried to portray me as a representative of the thing I was arguing against in that article.
Okay, I understand that context. I don't know that I agree with it, but I understand it.
Sure.
And so, but do you worry that your parishioners are going to misunderstand you when you use that kind of language? And you also wrote once, a husband is never trespassing in his own garden. That a man might see that and get the wrong idea that he can do whatever he wants to his wife, sexually or otherwise.
Sure. I think that phrase, "a man's not trespassing in his own garden," came from a book my wife wrote to women, but that's been circulated also. What we are talking about there is a normal relationship, a normal sexual relationship between normal people. We're not talking about rape. Rape is not the issue. What we're saying is that a woman should not begrudge giving herself to her husband. And as Paul, the Apostle Paul teaches in 1 Corinthians, he says the woman's body belongs to the man, and he says the man's body belongs to the woman. We are to be generous with one another. So when Nancy wrote that he's not trespassing in his own garden, she was simply talking about sexual generosity within the context of a normal marriage with normal people.
Okay, so now lastly, we've done all the issues. As a macro look at all of this, right? Pastor Wilson, again, a genuine question. When, if you're a black person or you're gay or you're a woman, all these, or non-Christian, can you see why people would think, oh no, I don't want any piece of this. This isn't for me, and this winds up with me not being equal. And so, yeah, I'm going to argue against this with all my might.
Right. I can see why people who have a different worldview than mine recoil from, especially when they hear it for the first time. I fully understand why they recoil from it. I get that. But I also get the reason I'm talking to you on this podcast, and the reason I've been talking to New York Times and Politico and all the things, is because a lot of people hear what I'm saying and they're saying, this makes way better sense than the sexual insanity and the ethnic insanity that we've been going through for the last 5 years. So, yeah, there are people who react negatively and big time negatively to what I'm saying. I grant that. I've had haters for decades. I get your point. But I also have garnered, for some strange reason, over the last 5 years, a strange new respect that I've not had before. And a lot of people are paying attention because the things I'm saying are resonating with people, because I'm saying them in the midst of this clown world of ours.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a white male, then I get why it resonates. In your vision of the world, you're on top of the world. And women have to listen to you, and you get to rule, but the others don't, and you get some rights and the others don't. So I can see how that's appealing, but it's ironically, to me, and I'm not trying to be insulting, but it feels like I assimilated America maybe a little bit better than you did, because I'm with equality and freedom and justice for all, and you seem to have it in different buckets.
No, you assimilated to a particular vision of America better than I did, and I assimilated to another vision of America, I think, better than you did. And if it had to do with people who are of different stripes, different colors, different national backgrounds, if you were to come to our church and look across our congregation, and you came with the supposition that we were, white supremacists or something, you would then come to the conclusion that we were very bad at it, because we've got all kinds. So it's simply false to say black people are going to hear what I say and react negatively, because one of my biggest cheerleaders in the church is a friend of mine, a black man. Another man in our church from Africa is a very eloquent advocate of the things I'm saying. This is not a color thing, and it's not a gender thing. The women in our church are high performance, very intelligent, highly educated, and they're on board. The people who are what people would call ethnic minorities are on board. We had, the doors are open. The Church of Christ is international. We welcome all comers, and so we're not narrow in the way that people represent us as being narrow. We're narrow theologically, but not culturally.
Yeah, there's a funny mirror image there, because again, having grown up Muslim, Turkey's very secular, so we didn't have any burqas, but I know there's other parts of the Muslim world that do. But every time I debate with those guys, they say, no, the women like the burqas. They want the burqas. They chose the burqas. So it's a little bit of an interesting,
Can we ask them? No.
Yeah, well, no. By the way, that's not true. Because it's the overwhelming culture there, like in your church, the women in those fundamentalist Muslim societies and cultures go, no, I do want it. I wouldn't want to be seen by other men. That's very immoral and scandalous, etc. Anyways, look, right. We obviously have some disagreements. I like that we did it in a civil way, and people got to hear both stories. Like you say ethnic, insanity. I love the different ethnicities in America, and I'm part of what I came here for. I love that we get along, not perfectly, not anywhere near it. I like that we all contribute. I like the United States of America, and when you say sexual insanity, I say where. That doesn't sound that bad to me, but I guess it depends on your definition.
I'll let it go with that. There's plenty to say, but I'll let it go.
All right, Pastor Doug Wilson, with obviously an ideology I don't agree with at all, but a fascinating conversation. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the honor of joining with you. Thank you.
All right.